is August 24th, 2022, and we're right towards the end of the dog days of summer. The market itself has been interesting, to say the least, and typically August is a really dull month. There's been more action than usual, I think, this year. In past years, I mean, there was a lot of days where it was just better to do something else. But interestingly enough, excuse me. Interestingly enough, um, the market. Oh, pending home sales are coming out right now. A lot of times when I'm doing the show, Wednesday at 10 o'clock, when I do these shows, a lot of times we're waiting on something that's, I think it was last week, it was the Fed minutes were coming out, and sometimes there's economic data that breaks a lot of times, and sometimes the market's waiting on something like a Fed announcement. So it's kind of actually an interesting day to do the show. And here we are again. So everyone seems to be waiting on the Jay Powell's speech and or comments at the big Jackson Hole meeting, which is going to be, I guess, Thursday and Friday, tomorrow and the next day. And so it's going to be kind of interesting because the market's basically in sort of like a crazy trading range. There's been a lot of weird stuff happening lately, and let me I forgot that I still had the intro running here. Let me pull up this chart that we've been looking at for, geez, we've been looking at this chart now for quite some time, since the spring, really. At least since April, where we drew that downward sloping trend line, and it is absolutely uncanny how the market was able to rally all the way up to that trend. This is a weekly chart, by the way, obviously, but rallied all the way up to that trend line and literally touched it and reversed back down. And so you can see, this week we're only on Wednesday here, but I mean, I guess that's why people use technical analysis, right? I mean, sometimes it never ceases to amaze me how, certain levels, certain lines on the chart, certain moving averages, that type of thing, come into play, and it's people have said, well, technical analysis is a self-fulfilling prophecy or this and that, but it's amazing. Over the years, I have seen so many trend lines that get touched like that, and what's even crazier about it is, hang on, let me just I got to find a daily chart here with some moving averages on it. Unfortunately, let's see what I got here. There we go. So there's a chart with, let me get my perspective back here. All right, I was looking for a chart where I had a 50-day and a 200-day moving average, and here's one. So anyway, back to SPY, right? Or actually, no, I meant to look it up. SPX. There we go, the SPX. Yeah, so look at this. You saw the weekly chart with the trend line and how, this rally here from, I guess you could call it July, June, July rally went up and literally touched that trend line and peaked, right, on the weekly chart. And if we look at the daily chart here, this goes to what I was just saying a minute ago about how uncanny it is that certain times, trend lines get touched perfectly. Well, look at the 200-day moving average here. I mean, it's almost ridiculous. It's almost it can't be a coincidence, put it that way. Now, of course, the SPY poked above it a little bit, and some of the other indexes, didn't quite do it. But I mean, this is the market. What most people consider to be the market is the S&P 500. So when I talk about the market, this is basically what I'm referring to. I like to look at the SPY on a daily basis because it shows the actual open. It reflects, I should say, the actual open of the market better than the SPX index. And I don't know exactly what the difference is or how they calculate it. And of course, the SPY pays a dividend, and so that sort of affects it too. And so, when you're talking about the market, so here's my thoughts on this. Well, there's a couple of thoughts, but one is that this congestion area here that we were looking at, right? That kind of matches up with this congestion area. Um, I guess the pain trade here, you see that gap up. The pain trade was an extension of that, and it's absolutely uncanny how it rallied straight up. There's 5 days there, and the high this day was literally at the downward sloping 200-day moving average, and it got rejected, right? And so now we're right back down into that same sort of congestion zone. And also, interestingly enough, that same trend line, that same exact trend line from the highs, drawn across the daily chart, basically, matches up to that same level there. So, there you go. And so, you had talk about overhead resistance. Now, obviously, there was resistance along the way. And so I think that, well, I don't think, but I know that no one, I won't say no one, but very few people probably expected a rally of that magnitude with hardly any pullbacks along the way. And so, you remember down here at the in June and July near the lows, everyone was bearish and the sentiment was bad, and so, it's like a pendulum that swings both ways. And quite frankly, I didn't expect this rally to have that much legs, right? But at the same time, it's just kind of interesting how they managed to rally it all the way up there and all the way to the trend line. And so the downward sloping trend line, that was the big kahuna, or whatever I called it, that was the major trend line. Obviously, there's some other trend lines that I probably drew or whatever that you could look at, but that was the biggie right there. That was the major trend line because it goes all the way back to the beginning of the year, right? And drawn across the all-time high in the history of the world, um, down across this humongous relief rally in March. And the market took a winger right at the beginning of the year, and then of course you have a bounce and lower lows, and I mean, during these times, and then you had, like, this is when Russia invaded Ukraine, and there was all sorts of things going on. Interest rates were going up, and so I mean there was a lot of turmoil to start this year off, and so right here about 42.50 after this sell-off, you had people saying that, man, it was overdone, the selling was